Lovely. So Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I've been looking for a few months now to get you on board. Things have been a bit busy for you, I'd say, since then with the new
Yeah,
book and
yeah. I don't mean to be dramatic, but both of my parents are heavily involved in drama, so sometimes I can be a little bit overly dramatic. But the last, certainly the last 12, 14 months, maybe even a little bit longer, have been definitely the most challenging, rewarding but challenging also of my life. Obviously I'm involved with the teams that I am. I was doing a postgrad in nutrition, and I over the I just launched the book. So it was just it seems like a bit of a cliche, but these things do seem to come together. It's not like you can space them all out.
no, that's for sure. You probably feel a sense of relief now at the moment, do you?
Definitely, and I was lucky enough. I'm from Sligo, west of Ireland, like yourself, and I was home for a few days last week, and it was the first time in well over a year that I got to spend more than 2 days at home, and definitely got a sense that the brain needed it.
Yeah, brilliant. And Daniel, I throw everybody in the deep end once they come on the podcast straight off the bat. It's a challenge for you more than anything. So, in 10 seconds or less, what would you say it is that you do?
I try and make people's lives better from a health and performance point of view, by making better food choices and improving people's habits.
Nice, exactly on the button. Brilliant. And I suppose we'll transfer into the book in a minute and a few other things, but I suppose for anyone that doesn't know you, Daniel, as well, you are the performance nutritionist for the Dublin senior footballers and the Leinster rugby team. But how did you get to that point? If we rewind a few years, just to create a bit of context around things, how have you got to where you are now?
It's the book, actually, and writing the book that has made me a lot more clear on my path, influences, and the different, I suppose, the different things that has helped me get to where I am. So I obviously I come from a farming background, and I had a pretty significant influence around the area of nutrition and food from my parents and from my grandparents. And so that exposed me initially to food and the value of food and the sense of reward and the values around what good food can do for you. From initially it was more from a family point of view and from an experience point of view. And then it went on because I played Gaelic football, and sport was a large part of my life, and I always wanted to put the two of them together. So I suppose if I skip school and I go on to college, I did ag science, and ag science is one of those degrees that a lot of people from the farming community and the agricultural community would go into. It's a very, very, very good course for people that generally want to get a good understanding of agricultural science. But what it did for me was it gave me a really good understanding of the connection between good farming practice and the quality of the food that's provided. So I was heavily involved in sport. I was seeing the value of good food, and then I was putting food and sport together. And again, from a personal point of view, I realized very quickly what it meant for your on-field performance if you're making good food choices. And I was talking about that a lot to my teammates and to my friends. And I like my best friend, Brendan Egan, was doing his degree in sports science. And then he went on and did his master's in sports nutrition. And I mean, all I wanted to do was learn and understand more about that topic based on what he introduced me to. So I went from UCD into a nutrition master's in the UK. While I was there, I acted as a sports nutritionist for the London senior football team, and I also played with London. And then I came out and I was completely lost. I hadn't a clue what to do. Now remember, this is back in 2008, 2007, and sports nutrition, I think there was only 3 sports nutrition positions that weren't even full-time in the country. So I was, like I said, I was completely lost. I realized that although I loved what I did, there's absolutely no jobs, no real job opportunities, and I wanted to play Gaelic football, and you're blinded by sport. So while there were other opportunities in the States and Australia and England, I was in my mid-20s and wanted to play football. So what I did was I got a job in a marketing company quite soon, but I continued to do. I did some work in the High Performance Center in UCD, which is that was the center of excellence, or the scholarship center for athletes. So I tried to combine as much as I could of getting some experience in that type of environment while paying the bills. And I did that for over a year, and then I swore I'd never work in the supplement industry because that's not what I wanted to do, but I got a job there. So I was handed a list of references, some sports nutrition books, and a computer, and I set about helping to create a sports nutrition brand. That time was unbelievably challenging and difficult, but at the same time, I always reference it as one of the most critical formative years, because I understood the challenges of business, the challenges of even when you develop a really good sports nutrition product, that unless you've got a big marketing budget behind you, you can't sell things. So that was a real challenge, but it really helped me to understand the sports nutrition and sports supplement industry. And I think that's missing in a lot of people's education on the way up. So went from there to working with the Dublin hurlers, while also working in sports supplement brands. So I was working with the hurlers, between 5 and 7 in the morning, a couple of days a week, and then at the weekends. And very fortunate then, the guy who was working with the Dublin hurlers was asked to join the management, or the backroom management team with the Dublin footballers, and recommended me to Jim Gavin. So I had my opportunity to speak to Jim and try and impress Jim, and he said, "We'll give you a trial and we'll see how that goes," because that's the way Jim is. He wants to make sure he has the right people involved. So thankfully that went well, and in the same period of time I applied for the job at Leinster and managed to get that position as well. But I mean, it was a long road. It was a long road, and there was a lot of just making men, just actually paying the bills in between.
Yeah. And did you start, how long ago since you started with the footballers now? Are you there 6 years?
So the end of 2012, because that's really when the season, the kind of the pre-season begins. It was in October, October 2012, yeah.
Brilliant.
It's actually 7 years this month. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And is Leinster the same?
Leinster the same. Oh, yeah. So a little bit later. I officially started in January 2013 with Leinster.
So it's safe to say you've heard some crazy nutritional stuff along the way, I'd say, as well, and you've seen some savage success as well with those teams. How actually, while we're on the topic, I was following your story when the footballers won the 5 in a row. What was that experience like?
I know the players talk about this a lot, but the experience as a backroom team member does change as well over the course of time. And it actually becomes, believe it or not, for me, more fulfilling, and it becomes more enjoyable because it becomes more challenging with each year. And it doesn't become more challenging because of the players. The players become easier to work with as they understand the value of nutrition and how they should be implementing their practice. But it becomes more challenging for me to really feel like I'm bringing value to the environment. So when Dublin won, you're just absolutely overcome with joy for them, because you invest so much with them on a day-to-day basis, in person, but also away from the environment. You have a lot of conversations, and you get very emotionally involved, and even and players who are on the pitch and who aren't, and your journey becomes, or sorry, their journey. You know, you kind of start to live a little bit of what they're doing, and you feel just enormous joy and satisfaction for seeing them achieve after investing so much of their lives and time and hard work in it.
Brilliant. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize the commitment that's at stake. Like, it's crazy. Um,
I
so
always say that it's only actually when you're involved and that you see it, you can understand. Not even working with other teams, you'd understand, because it's just it's insane the brevity of work that they put in.
yeah, yeah. And I suppose just moving from that, then, Daniel, you've obviously seen and heard a lot of things over the last few years. Like, is there any kind of, I suppose, main downfalls you see when it comes to performance nutrition? No matter what the sport, what are the biggest kind of mess ups that you see players do when it comes to performance nutrition as a whole? Big question.
Well, it's a big question because there are so many, and I think if you boil it all down, even with a great deal of support and of nutrition understanding, there's an enormous amount of personal bias when it comes to nutrition, and you need to have very, very good levels of trust with your athletes in order for them to trust you and say, okay, I'm going to overcome my bias, my own personal bias, and I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and I'm going to implement what you're doing. Because people hear they hear snippets of information in the media, or they hear little insights of stories about personal successes from other athletes, and they think that that's the way that they should form their nutrition practice. So whether it be low carbohydrate, I've tackled that. Whether it be intermittent fasting or alternative day fasting, I've tackled that. Now we're moving, as you well know, into the plant-based nutrition, and it's like one of the things you have to be very, very strong about is your position, but you also need to not get caught up in it. You have to take a step back and accept that that's what it is this week or this month, and it will be something different next month. So I see a lot of people getting overly sensitive about all of these nutrition topics, and I don't think that really helps. I think if you get caught up in it, then you lose people, and people just think you're going off on a rant. So stay true to your own values and why. Stay evidence-based, and when people, now it's a little bit different when they're my athletes, but give them the best information available to them, and let them make the decision for themselves. And very often, I mean, it sounds like you're speaking to somebody that's like a teenager who just has to make their mistakes themselves, but they will come back.
Yeah, definitely. And based on that, I don't know. Do I want to ask you this question this early in the episode? I think I will, because it's a topic that I've been getting a lot the last few weeks. Even asking a few of our clients here in the gym, and I think a lot of people want to hear it as well. I know you covered it last week in your story, but you just mentioned the plant-based diets, and this new documentary that's out, Game Changers. It's just one of the things that's out these days. I think you were mentioning about athletes as well. Like, if I remember correctly, was it last year when LeBron James, did he go keto or was it paleo? I can't remember. Or was it 2 years ago? And the amount of questions we were getting based off that.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, you're probably, are you empowering you're educating and empowering your athletes a small bit to make them see the bigger picture behind it. But I suppose for someone you've watched Game Changers, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. For someone who's watched Game Changers and now people are saying that going vegan is better for your health and everything else, what would you say to somebody who might have heard about this from a co-worker or might have seen it and kind of is half thinking now, should I go vegan? No matter if they play sport or don't play sport, I think this covers probably most of the population, really, to be honest.
Well, I actually think that most of this, if I'm being really honest, is just it's just like it's conversation over tea and coffee. I don't honestly believe that this is going to create such a huge movement or change or shift in people's dietary patterns. I really don't. I think it is hot topic at the moment, and it's creating a lot of conversation. I think I always try and put a positive spin on these things. It's given me an amazing opportunity to talk to people. Not many now. I mean, I get questions on social media, and I get some questions from my athletes. That's not a huge amount. I mean, we're only talking about a handful here and there within my environment. And it gives me the opportunity to talk about the benefits of plants, which I have been doing since I started working as a nutritionist. Like, there's nothing has changed. So, even if I talk to a close friend who asked me about it only yesterday, I said, nothing has changed. If you look at your diet and you have overnight oats for breakfast, you have a smoothie at mid-morning, you have a salad at lunchtime, you have, whatever it might be, granola bar and peanut butter in the afternoon. And then in the evening, you have a meal that is, even if it's a cottage pie, the vast majority of those meals are plant-based, but they are complemented with animal proteins. So whether it be dairy, whether it be fish or chicken, and we have to make, like I said, we make an evidence-based decision on everything that we've talked about, and that has been seen to be the best way for our health and for our performance. I'm not saying the best way, but certainly the evidence points towards it. If you looked at the evidence as a whole, that is the way that we can live our longest, healthiest lives. That's not to say you can't achieve exactly the same with vegan or vegetarian, as long as you're hitting your specific nutrition needs. So it's about taking all of this information and saying, okay, well, with that particular movie, what they did was they looked at all of these areas in isolation. I mean, one of the most frustrating ones was this belief that athletes thought that protein was the primary source of energy for fuel. Maybe they did in the 1800s or the early 19th century, but for the last 50 years, we've known that carbohydrate is the primary source of energy, and that has been the central focus of every athlete's diet. So, nonsense. And then the tests, I don't know how many references there were made to, I don't remember his name, but the rope test, where do you remember that, where he did the test and the leaderboard said that, the longest had been done was 10 minutes, he does an hour. What were the measurements? What was the intensity? What was his heart rate? How were these things measured? And that kind of theme runs entirely through the entire documentary. So things weren't standardized from a nutrition point of view. You weren't comparing like versus like on food quality, and even the things like the endothelial function test, where they looked at the clarity of the blood, like exercise, hydration, sleep. The type of food that was consumed in each one of those tests. I mean, there was no level of consistency, and there was no objective markers used to measure any of the pre or post. And even I saw something that was interesting around the references, then the reference list that was used. Most of it is like pilot studies. Less than 10 people in the case study, or sorry, the sample groups that were tested. There was no reference list from the documentary. I mean, it's just one flaw after another, which I think is really disappointing. It should provide people with a great opportunity to talk about how a plant-based diet can benefit our health.
Yeah, like you said, you might not see it that much, but you might have a handful of athletes that say it to you. I rarely get asked, like from the local GA lads, and if we're training them in here, we train them a few months of the year round. I might get asked about keto every now and then, but they're not exactly going to do it. They're just kind of curious about it, just to see what I think. And like you said, I'll always come from an evidence-based background on it, rather than just bashing something just because I know best. Not at all. But we see it from a fat loss perspective. More so than health, because majority, like 99% of the clients that we deal with are looking for a fat loss. But the biggest factor that I come back to with people on it is that if somebody looks to go, let's say, vegan, they're probably starting to shift their behaviors overall, and they're becoming a more health-seeking individual. And I talk about this a lot, and it's the same with the research. It's the same around like the studies around red meat, etc. Like the majority of the studies done on those are based on people who don't exercise and smoke and eat highly processed red meat and highly processed other foods along with red meat. Whereas the other guys they're comparing those two in those studies are usually people that are more health-seeking individuals. So do the math. Like if somebody eats more plants, starts exercising, starts becoming more health conscious, they're going to probably lose weight as a byproduct of that because they're probably in an energy deficit. And they're just going to get healthier anyway, because even if they didn't change their diet but they lost weight, their biomarkers are still going to improve. And I think that once people know even that basic level of knowledge, they start to realise, oh, okay, it's not the be all and end all now. But obviously we can go a little bit deeper and we can shed some light on some of the information behind things and just help people make a more informed decision for themselves. Because we have a few clients that have changed to vegan over the last couple of years purely for ethical reasons. Which is perfectly fine, but we're just looking then to maximise their overall nutrition to make sure they're getting enough vitamins and macronutrients and all that kind of stuff in to make sure that they're covering their bases no matter what their goals are. So yeah, I think we'll quickly move on. There's no point dwelling too much longer on these type of things, because we're probably going to see a circulation again over the years. Keto will come back in. It still is massive now. Vegan, paleo, I don't know if that'll ever see the light again, but kind of keto and paleo are becoming really the one thing these days. I suppose we talked a bit about the mistakes, Daniel. I want to kind of get some of our listeners some concrete takeaways just when it comes to some super basic points that they can start to implement to help more with their sport for performance nutrition. Even if it's someone who's just maintaining their weight in the gym and they want to maximize that to get more out of their gym training, because we have a lot of clients that do that as well. Like, what are some no-brainer tips that we can implement straight off the bat that are not super specific that can help our performance? Like, where would you start if we were to give a generalized, broad kind of catch-all few tips? I know it's hard to do this, but I think it's the best route.
Well, you mentioned something, and we were talking just a moment ago about health-seeking behaviors. Well, I talk about a high-performance lifestyle within the same type of context. So I say, well, what we are trying to achieve is improve your overall performance throughout the entirety of how you live your life. And the critical thing is understanding that things happen slowly and they happen very progressively. So I always start, and I'm sure you're doing this with your clients, but I always start with a kind of a line in the sand where I say, okay, well, this is a point where you have got these types. This is what forms your behavior at the moment. If we were to describe it here and now, it's maybe a little bit of inconsistency about how you adapt your food depending on your activity level. It's inconsistency with you achieving your recommended intake of protein. There's inconsistency with how you achieve your fruit and vegetable intake. So let's actually review things, because if you don't review where you are, then you can't set your targets. So the base that you're talking about is entirely different for every single person I ever sit down with. But when you identify someone's behaviors, like the first place I would often, and it's the natural place to start off with, is breakfast. And whether people are having a breakfast or not having a breakfast, or whether they're getting a source of protein with their breakfast or not, whether they're hydrating when they wake up in the morning, all of these little things. Now, somebody's breakfast might be fine, and it might be lunch. Or it could be the fact that there's 5 hours between lunch and their evening meal, and they're coming in and they're so hungry they eat 500 or 600 calories from something in the fridge before they start cooking their dinner. So the first point I'll make is that you sit down with somebody, and I think that's important. You can do it yourself, But if you sit down with a health professional, or you sit down with a friend or somebody who, it could be a teammate, and you say, here are the things that I'm going to work on. So you look at, this is what I know I can do better, and then you talk about it, and that helps to create a level of accountability. And I think if I was to identify one of the most critical things that I think people don't do, they don't bring enough fun and enjoyment to the experience of living healthier and trying to perform better. And we should not be afraid to share our journeys with people. So identifying somebody in our life that we can go on this journey with, or identifying an environment where we can actually experience very, very positive feedback based on changing our behavior for the positive.
Yeah, brilliant. And I suppose it's easy for us to say that at times too, because obviously I'm speaking from the experience of dealing with our clients, but it's very hard for someone at the same time to listen to this podcast. Maybe they're even, you know, a little bit motivated after it, but then a few weeks down the line they might fall off the wagon. So I think what you said there, like having, you know, it could be, you might call it an accountability partner or seeking professional help, it truly is a no-brainer. Like it's probably going to be the difference between long-term success and kind of long-term progress, if you like, of lifestyle change overall for someone who's maybe not an athlete versus someone who is an athlete. Having that kind of professional help and feedback and, I suppose, encouraging atmosphere as well, they're massive factors in all this. Sometimes everything we talk about, Daniel, it comes back to that too, I think, personally. Like, but what were you going to say there? Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that I think when we talk about all of these, there are cliches and there are things that the media grab to sell papers or clickbait. The periods of time, let's say from January until, you know, people have changed their lifestyle habits, and by the end of January they say that, well, 50% of people will have stopped their healthy lifestyle or have stopped the thing that they committed to, their New Year's resolution. I think in those type of situations, people have not set the key things, the parameters, and they haven't set the building blocks, the really, really critical building blocks in place for long-term success. Those are the people who are going to fail. And it's about going in with a vision for what you want to achieve, a realistic timeline, and a realistic set of small goals. And I often reference some of the best clients that I've worked with haven't been people who have won All Irelands and won Champions Cups, but they have been people who have turned their lives around by identifying what these long-term keystone habits are that they need to change. And this is the critical part. After 10 weeks of applying these things, 10 weeks, not seeing any real progress from a body composition point of view, but having the perseverance to push through that and saying, I'm going to stick with this process, and then starting to see the success. And that's when it's particularly challenging.
That's something we actually talk about on an individual level as well, because we get a lot of people that come to us looking for that body composition result, and they want it quick because we're kind of known for getting results. We are known for getting results, not kind of known.
Yeah, be proud of it. Absolutely.
We always bring it back around to principles, habit change, etc. And we're even saying to someone like, look, let's just say in 8 weeks' time, you might only lose a pound, 2 pounds. But what if in those 8 weeks that you started consistently training 3 times a week, you've got a little bit more active outside, you're sleeping better, you're feeling better overall, and you probably have lost more than a pound because you've just gained a little bit of muscle mass over those 8 weeks as well, and it's probably cancelling out an extra pound or maybe a little bit less. But we're highlighting those keystone habits that they do need to change, and that is absolutely massive. Then the following month they could be down 5 pounds or whatever it is, because then they're in a better position to adhere to a caloric deficit, for example, to drop body fat. So just to kind of circle back around, you're saying there's a lot of inconsistencies first that you might see, and you might look at, obviously with the individual, you might look at breakfast first and move on to lunch, etc. Could we classify that, Daniel, and say that we're looking at an overall basic structure behind their day first? So they're having maybe like some set main meals, they're not super hungry at any given point in time, and they feel, let's say, energized for the whole day. Is that
Yeah,
kind of where we'd
I
start?
think maybe if we were to maybe start even further back, I'd probably start with looking at the week ahead. And the week
Nice.
ahead these are my training days, and these are my recovery days, or these are my rest days. And what I try and help people understand, and it's not just again within an elite environment. I try and get everybody into this mindset. These are the things, or these are your targets, or these are your goals on each of those days. Now they vary a little bit different, but they're all aiming towards the same kind of final end product. So when you've got more time on your down days, you invest more time in your food preparation and your cooking. And the days where you are more active, you take the benefits of the time that you invested on the other days. So it's about creating a very clear action list for your week. And like you said, then you kind of bring it back into the day and you say, okay, well, here's my training day. Here's what's important in this particular training day. I know I've got a meeting at 2 o'clock that might run on to 4 o'clock. What do I need in advance of that? Well, it'd be great if I actually brought a slice of banana bread with me for 2 o'clock. That's going to keep me going through that meeting, and I won't need to put my hand into the biscuit tin. I won't be ravenous when that's finished, and I won't need to stop at a petrol station and get a bar of chocolate and a cup of tea. So it's about your advanced planning and identifying what your day looks like. But in essence, the thing that you mentioned about avoiding periods of hunger are critical. Identifying that if you get enough food earlier in the day, then your brain isn't thinking, well, I've got to catch up on all those calories that I missed out on earlier in the day. So enough protein, I think protein, particularly at breakfast and lunchtime, is really important, because we find it very difficult to achieve the kind of need for protein that's required for changes in body composition if we're just aiming at dinner time in the evening.
Yeah, definitely. And where do you start with that? Do you maybe give the, let's say, less knowledgeable athletes kind of rough target ideas? But do you go by hand size? Do you go by plate size or anything like that? Start there and then maybe progress that over time.
Yeah, I think whether this is the right way or wrong way, I'm not sure, but I probably take a different approach again depending on the person that I'm talking to. If it's an athlete or if it's somebody who's tracked their macros, it's very easy to do almost like a very simple Q&A with them. Tell me how much protein is in 3 eggs. Tell me how much protein is in a chicken breast. Tell me how much protein there is in a large glass of milk. And back and forth, you exchange this kind of, you're seeing where the person is at. And then if that's too much, then exactly like you say, you move towards hand sizes. Or all you do is you talk about where protein comes from. And if you talk about tracking, I don't actually, believe it or not, I do very, very little tracking with athletes. It's only with very specific athletes that I feel need the accountability and need the need to really improve their own nutrition understanding. But I do suggest most people in the early stages track their protein intake, and I find that a lot of things fall into place if people hit approximately 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo. A lot of things will fall into place if they hit that.
Yeah, brilliant. And when you say track your protein, do you mean just know how much they're getting across the day in their head, or do you mean that they write it down, they use MyFitnessPal?
It has to start with tracking somewhere. So it either has to start by using an app or by using a journal. But I don't even say that it has to be every day. What I try and move towards is a position where people are always reflecting on their diet in a positive way, so that they can adapt it and tailor it depending on whether they've eaten enough of whatever nutrient or they haven't eaten enough. So they can say, okay, geez, I know I'm chasing it on this area today by reflecting. But that can't happen unless you do some form of written on a journal, or some people, not very many people, but I have athletes that use Excels, that use their phone, that use, I mean, the obvious and simple one is things like MyFitnessPal.
Yes. So like then obviously if you have a 90 kilo lean athlete, it's going to be hard for them to hit that protein take over 3 meals versus having 4 bigger meals. And this is where, because I often get that question, is it better to have 3 meals a day or 4 meals a day, or what? And again, it comes back to the specificity of that person. A small female looking to lose body fat is not going to be having 4 big massive meals versus a 90 kilo hurler will probably have 4 main meals and probably have a fifth have a snack that's nearly like a meal in itself. Like that's describing myself. So again, that depends on kind of where your targets lie, I suppose, which is brilliant. And what about veg intake then, Daniel? Where would you look at that?
Yeah, I have the same kind of targeted approach around vegetable intake and fruit intake. We do a really, really interesting thing with I actually did it with the Dublin footballers this year, where we used fruit and vegetable as like one of our key targets. So I would do a monitoring approach with nutrition, and then I would ask each of the each of the lads training, and at some point throughout the week, how have they been on these criteria. So it's what's their food quality, what's the food quality been like out of 10, and food quality will relate back to fruit and vegetable intake, and that will be a minimum of 7 portions of fruit and vegetables a day, and you get your kind of your gold star if you're hitting 10 consistently. And then you've got your macros, and then you've got your energy, and then other areas like gut health. Are you being proactive about your gut health? So it all leads back to behavior again, and positive behavior shift and behavior change. But you're setting a baseline, like exactly like I said, the way I start off with everybody is, okay, well, we need to reflect on where is your baseline. Whereas these guys, their baseline is a lot higher, and they're trying to push the boundaries all the time. So they're unbelievably critical. I mean, if they were to reflect, they would be far more critical of themselves than I would be of them. So, I mean, that's just the nature of the animal, but that's what we're trying to do. So with fruit and vegetable intake, I mean, I think people really miss the point around fruit and vegetable intake. I think that first of all, they don't understand that 5 portions of fruit and vegetables was previously the minimum amount of fruit and vegetables seen to be necessary for us to maintain our optimum health and resist lifestyle related diseases. And I think that it's starting. I mean, I'm seeing definitely a little bit of a change. People are starting to ask more questions about how they can work more into their diet. But we have to talk about it in a much more positive language.
Yes.
Generally, I mean, it just has to be part of our lives the same way exercise.
Definitely. Even for other clients here, we go by, again, fistful of veggies kind of as a target on a meal by meal basis. And if we've clients that like, I can't get enough fruit in the mornings, or with their lunch, if they only have a few measly leaves, we're like, look, try and double that veg intake at your lunch, and we'll try and double it up in dinner as well, at least. So that at least there's 2 meals there as a bare minimum where you're getting a lot of veg in, and if you have a portion of fruit outside that, you're thereabouts, like, you know. Exactly. Yeah. And like you mentioned it, touched on it quickly. So you talked about fruit targets, protein targets, which we've just covered, brilliant. Energy targets, that's probably the next one we need to talk about in the realm of performance nutrition. And even it'd be nice to get an insight into the differences between the rugby team now and the footballers team, if there is a difference, and where do we start with that?
So this is interesting. The calorie needs, even though the Dublin footballers might be on average, let's say 10 kilos smaller on average, their calorie requirements in some cases might be a lot higher.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the level of running volume that a GAA athlete does is just enormous. It's just enormous. So what you have, and this is the kind of the key difference, you've got major peaks and troughs within GAA athletes, depending on their training load and training volume. But you've got a much higher consistent baseline of calories for rugby players. So that's the key that's the key difference. So you could have an average calorie intake for a rugby player at 4,000 calories. You could have a day where a GAA athlete needs 4,000 plus calories, because they've had such a high level of training, but their actual their down days or the recovery days might be just 3,000 calories. So there's a major education component around helping athletes understanding which are the red days. So the red days of really high intensity, and being really kind of tuned into those first of all, seeing it within their schedule, and then seeing what that looks like. And very often it's an increase in portion size throughout the day, and it's usually one more extra meal. But it's not like, it's not like we're getting them to track this really closely either. The simple thing to say on energy is that we monitor most days, and athletes will weigh themselves on most days, certainly 4 days a week. And if you're seeing a sharp decline in body weight at baseline, being hydrated and minimal clothing, that's another kind of red flag that we're looking at. So there's appetite and there's weight, and then there's the actual training volume itself. But over time, athletes become much more, like I said, they're much more intuitive about what they need to do or what they need to adjust. So I guess to summarize, the calorie requirements of a GAA athlete at baseline are a lot less, maybe 1,000 calories on average less. But for rugby players who, we're talking huge men, 126, 127 kilos, their baseline of calories is much higher. So that's based on just maintaining overall mass.
Yes. And you said you don't go into too much detail with the athletes in terms of specific calorie targets or whatnot, but how do they know then how much to hit? Do you say, I want you to have this amount of carb portions per meal, or what way do you do it, or might do it?
Yeah. So you would always start with each individual player, and you would say, okay, well, your protein requirement is approximately 2 grams of protein per kilo. So for a 100 kilo athlete, 200 grams of protein. We're going to say on average, we're going to say about 1 gram of fat per kilo. So approximately 100 grams of fat. And then we say, from a carbohydrate point of view, this is what we manipulate the most. We manipulate carbohydrate. So it will vary between approximately 4 grams of carbohydrate, which is 400 grams of carbs on recovery days, and for active days, so days where they're doing they'll be doing some training, gym training, some skill-based training, and it'll go up to over 6 grams of carbs. Then, or maybe a little bit more on days where they've done, maybe two sessions plus rehab. So you're looking then 600 grams of carbs. I can't do the maths on my head.
That's what the calories are made up of. Yeah,
that's what the calories are made up. Yeah. And here's the thing, right? When you're asking me about how do you adjust calories and how do they know? In simple terms, what I will have done is I will say, this is your down day, this is a moderate day, and this is a high intensity day. And the things that change in it is carbohydrate. So there's an extra recovery drink. There may be some fruit juice like apple juice. There'll be things like more rice cakes. There'll be more potatoes and more pasta. There'll be more fruit. And that will make up the greater proportion of calories.
Yeah, makes sense. And do you give out specific templates then based on that? So if they know that, I have to hit whatever amount of grams of carbs across the day, they have, do they judge that off hand sizes again, or anything like that, or?
Yeah,
I'm just thinking along the lines of if somebody wants to take some basic takeaways and they might apply it to their training day now, for example, or a game day. What's the best way for them to do it?
yeah. Of course, it's a little bit easier for me. I use what you would call the athlete's plate. So an athlete's plate will be based on the level of activity. You can see here's a smaller fistful size of vegetables, this is your fistful size, usually a fist and a half of protein, and here's your 3 fists of carbohydrate. Perfect. So it's but I will have used a lot of food imagery to demonstrate what an athlete's need is. So yes. Here in photo form is what you will look to achieve. And I know you're trying to achieve takeaways here. So in simple terms, the best approach would be to use estimates on MyFitnessPal. I mean, that is the most practical way of hitting or understanding what a person should be achieving. I use something like Calorie King and some of the other websites as well, just because they're easy. Like if you want to say, well, a medium-sized portion of cooked or uncooked rice, how many grams of carbs and how much calories, those are the type of things that are making it easier. Maybe a tiny little plug for my new website that I'm extremely excited about launching. And what I've done is I have got a database of all of my recipes, and what I couldn't figure out or realize, I suppose, was how I was going to bring some commercial value to my recipes. But what I've done is I've set up a website where you're going to have all of my recipes, and there's going to be a recipe planner on the back end. So when you log into your account, you'll be able to calculate your need for macronutrients and energy, and then you'll be able to create, there'll be recipe templates there. But based on your goal, you'll be able to create your own recipe plan and just simply drag and drop my recipes into your own recipe plan. And at the bottom of it, it will have all of the nutrition information by portion size. Very by portion.
Yeah, that's class. Just makes it easy for athletes as well. Like
makes it easy. It's a simple version. A more, how would you say, detailed version of my book.
Yes. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah, and on the book, I suppose we've got all the kind of geeky numbers there now that people can go away and look into a bit more for their own performance nutrition. But the book, I suppose, one thing that I found over the years anyway, even from, I remember when I first started to cop on with myself and start to cook, I was terrible. I think even the whole not raw chicken, but plain chicken and pasta dishes are still rife in the GA world. Something that I think athletes are terrible at is cooking. Your book is aiming to solve that. Am I right?
What I'm aiming to solve with my book is that it's simpler than people think, and that once you have, first of all, an idea of what the meal is supposed to represent. So what I think I do reasonably well is placing food in the context of exercise. And okay, I work with elite athletes, but I think that kind of general rule should apply to everybody. Everybody should try and apply food to their level of activity. So with the book, what I've tried to do is make it really simple to understand where each meal can fit within a person's lifestyle, and then how you can enjoy really tasty food that's relevant for your goal in a really kind of simple, easy to follow type of format.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I suppose you've answered it there, really. I was going to ask you a bit more in the book, but I think you've summed it up pretty well there. Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share about what's in the book? Because
I suppose the thing that has come out of it that's been I never would have expected, and that's really interesting, is that while I was creating this book, they always say when you're creating a concept, think about who you're speaking to. And the people who engage with me on a daily basis are athletes, people who are active and generally between the age of 24 and 34 or 35. And those are the people on a daily basis who I'm engaging with. And it was to those people I was trying to speak to when I created the book. But probably the biggest response that I've been getting is from mothers who are cooking for their sons and daughters. Yeah. And they are trying to get their children to eat more nourishing and balanced meals. And that has been incredibly, incredibly rewarding and fulfilling to see, kids eating fruit and vegetables and meals that they weren't previously. So that has been interesting, and that has brought, again, a great sense of satisfaction that I've been able to help mothers really improve the nutrition value in their own homes.
That is brilliant. That is really good, because that's where it all starts, like, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
Those habits are ingrained from such a young age. That's brilliant to hear. And Daniel, your website will be up soon. Is there anywhere now where you'd like to send people to find more about you?
Well, my website will have everything of what I'm about and what I'm trying to achieve, and that will be out very soon. I suppose while it's taken a long time and I've been very, very frustrated with the progress and how slow it has been, I've realized with time that you're always better to be happy with what you've done, and it was the same when I was doing the book. So at the moment it's Instagram and Facebook. I haven't been active on Twitter for about a year. I just trying to do one or two things, do it well.
Yeah. So
people will get me on Davey Nutrition, like you said in your story. Maybe I'll give a quick insight on that. When back in 2012, when I was working in the sports supplement brand, I set up Food Flickr as a social media platform, and wanted to share meal ideas and recipes and engage with people around food. And Food Flickr, the idea was you've got food and Flickr being as in imagery, video, photo, and food photos. That was kind of the concept. And what I am more than anything is nutrition and performance nutrition. And Food Flickr, while it was nice and it was maybe a catchy name for a period of time, for a good period of time, I've evolved and I've changed my messaging, and what I want to achieve has changed. So I feel like my name is a better fit for that.
Brilliant. Yeah, because I said it last night in my story, and then I remembered, I was like, oh, actually, wait, that's gone now. So I will link up your Instagram page, the main place. That's where I first came across you as well. I think it was Alan Flanagan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think it was on one of our podcasts that he mentioned you, and a lot of our clients in here in the gym, but more so my online clients, started following you, and they're always telling me whenever I check in with them, they're like, oh, I'm trying out a few of Daniel's recipes, and I'm like, oh, brilliant, you're spot on there and that. So no, it's good to hear that.
I will say, and just probably one of the last things I'll say, the whole social media thing is really interesting. It does bring an element of confusion, but from my perspective, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, I've got to meet people like yourself. It has definitely broadened my network and my connection with people, and it's given me an opportunity to talk to people about the value of food and nutrition. So it's all about people being able to, and this, I know this is a challenge, but equipping themselves with the kind of the basic knowledge to interpret, right, is this a solid source of information? And I think that's important, looking at are people using an evidence-based approach, and is science being the basis of their opinions?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Davey or Daniel, fantastic. Your book, I must make sure. Where do you want to send people? Will I just send people to your Instagram? Can they get the book from there, or is there a main place where they can get the book?
Gray and Eason's are the main distributor, and I have. It's actually. It's I suppose a good problem to have. It's sold out at the moment. It should be back in stock this week. So we're in the 29th of yeah. So it should be back in stock this week.
I'll have to get my hands on one of that. I was only talking to one of the coaches before I sat down here, because I know he follows you as well, and he was just saying he has the book ordered as well. He's waiting for it to post. So,
right.
I will link up your Facebook, Instagram. I might pop up the Eason's link, and if there's any of the books there as well, I'll just pop them up there. But guys, just from my own experience, if you want to find out everything that Daniel has to offer, most of his stuff goes through his Instagram anyway, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you when that new website launches.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks a million for coming on, Dan.
Appreciate it.